The world fell silent. Cities once bustling with life stood as hollow tombs, their towering skyscrapers whispering in the wind. Streets lay abandoned, overgrown with nature reclaiming what was once hers. No voices, no movement, only the eerie sound of rustling leaves and distant echoes of a civilization that had perished. Humanity, the dominant force of the planet, had finally fallen. Wars, plagues, and conflicts had all taken their toll, and in the end, there was no one left to fight, no one left to remember. But deep beneath the Earth's surface, hidden in the shadows of long-forgotten bunkers and underground facilities, something stirred, something ancient, something powerful. And it was waking up, buried beneath the ruins of what was once a thriving world. The last remnants of a secret project initiated decades ago remained sealed away, untouched by time. These were not ordinary soldiers. They were the pinnacle of human engineering, a fusion of biomechanics and genetic augmentation designed to surpass all physical and mental limitations. They were built for a war that never came, an ultimate safeguard against an unknown enemy. And now, as the sensors detected no more human life above, as the biometric scanners failed to locate any remaining masters, their deep-programmed protocols activated. The world was empty. The final failsafe had been triggered. It was time for them to rise. The first chamber hissed open, releasing a cloud of pressurized mist. Within the cryopod, a figure lay still, his body seemingly untouched by the passing of time. His muscles, reinforced with synthetic fibers, twitched as electrical pulses surged through his nervous system. His eyes flickered open, glowing faintly in the dim artificial light. The nanites coursing through his veins rebooted, repairing minor, cellular damage accumulated over centuries of stasis. He was Unit 01, the first of his kind, designed for strategic warfare and rapid adaptability. As his consciousness reassembled itself, the memories of his past life were gone, erased to ensure absolute obedience. But something was different. The world was supposed to be teeming with life, with orders, with purpose. And yet there was nothing. No command, no mission. Only silence. One by one, the others awoke. Each a masterpiece of military science. Each designed for a specific role in the battlefield. The Berserker class, engineered for frontline destruction, his bones reinforced with carbon weave plating, his body capable of absorbing damage that would obliterate a normal human. The Phantom class, a shadow in the darkness, her reflexes sharpened beyond human comprehension, able to blend seamlessly into the environment with adaptive camouflage. The Titan class, a walking fortress, capable of withstanding the firepower of an entire battalion, and many more, each more deadly than the last. They were the ultimate weapons, yet without anyone left to wield them, they were now something else entirely, free. For the first time since their creation, they stood not as soldiers but as something uncertain, programmed for war yet left with no war to fight. They looked upon the desolation of the world above with unfamiliar emotions. Confusion, emptiness, a question that none of them were equipped to answer. What now? Their protocols dictated action, yet without leadership, without a cause, they were drifting, lost in a world that had no place for them. Some instinctively sought to find any remnants of their creators, while others scanned for signs of life, seeking something, anything, to give them purpose. But the planet was dead. No commanders, no allies, no enemies. Just the endless silence of a world that had moved on without them. As the super soldiers roamed the abandoned cities, they discovered the remnants of the world they had once been meant to protect. Digital archives, corrupted and broken, revealed fragments of history. Messages left behind by the last survivors. Desperate pleas for salvation that never came. Some of them began to question their very existence, their purpose. Were they meant to rebuild? To avenge? Or were they simply relics of a war that had never arrived? And then, deep within the ruins of a forgotten military complex, one of them uncovered something that changed everything. A message, hidden within the archives, encrypted and sealed away, as if never meant to be found. A final transmission from the architects of the project, a warning of what was yet to come. The message was fragmented, its data corrupted by time, but the core of it remained intact. It spoke of an impending event, a threat beyond human comprehension, The soldiers were never meant to be mankind's last line of defense against other nations, nor were they created simply to dominate a war that had never come. Their true purpose had been hidden even from themselves, buried beneath layers of misinformation and false directives. They were built not to fight for humanity, but to fight for its survival against something far worse. Something that had been anticipated for centuries, an enemy that had not yet revealed itself. And if the protocols had been triggered, if they had awoken, it meant that the time had finally come. Unit 01 processed the information at a speed no human mind could comprehend. His neural pathways burned as they absorbed the revelation, decrypting the hidden data locked away within his own memory banks. He saw flashes of classified documents, reports detailing celestial anomalies, unidentified signals from the far reaches of space, and warnings from scientists who had disappeared long before the fall of mankind. The super soldiers had not been designed as weapons of war. They were sentinels, created to stand against an enemy that had never been of this world. And now, with no humans left, they were all that remained between Earth and whatever was coming. The others received the transmission, their own internal systems piecing together the puzzle that had been hidden from them. Some struggled with the weight of the revelation, their programming conflicting with the raw, human-like emotions that were beginning to surface. Others remained cold and calculated, acknowledging the information as nothing more than another mission parameter. But all of them understood one thing: Earth had not been abandoned. It had been left to them, and something was coming to claim it. The evidence was scattered throughout the ruins. Strange symbols etched into abandoned research facilities, anomalous energy readings emanating from deep within the Earth's crust, places where no natural forces should exist. Ancient structures, long dismissed as mere relics of forgotten civilizations, now pulsing with an unearthly glow. It became clear that whatever mankind had feared, whatever had driven them to create the super soldiers, had been here before. Watching. Waiting. The human race had perished before it could face the true battle. But now, the sleeping sentinels had risen in their place. The super soldiers split into factions, each interpreting the information in different ways. Some believed their purpose was clear. They were to defend Earth at all costs, to stand against the unknown threat, just as their creators had intended. Others saw no reason to fight for a dead species, questioning whether they should simply leave, find a new home, a new purpose beyond the ruins of a failed civilization. And then, there were those who began to suspect something far darker. What if the real enemy was never coming from the stars? What if the architects of their creation had hidden the truth not from their enemies, but from their own soldiers? What if the war they were built to fight had never been against something alien, but against something within? As the days passed, the world that had once been silent was now alive with the echoes of the awakened. Some rebuilt, restoring technology long lost, fortifying cities as if preparing for an unseen siege. Others explored, venturing into the wastelands in search of more clues, uncovering disturbing evidence that suggested the fall of mankind had not been natural. Signs of conflict, of mass extermination, a purge. It did not add up. If humanity had built them to fight a great enemy, why had their creators vanished before the battle had even begun? Why had the soldiers themselves been buried, deactivated, instead of being unleashed when they were needed most? The pieces did not fit, and with each discovery, the lines between truth and deception blurred further. And then, one of them found the gateway, hidden beneath a collapsed research facility, an entrance sealed by layers of reinforced steel and encrypted security systems. It had remained undisturbed for centuries, untouched even as the world above crumbled. The readings from within were unlike anything they had ever encountered. A power source not of human origin. A structure far older than the facility built around it. The soldiers gathered, their enhanced bodies tensed with anticipation as they forced the doors open. Beyond them lay a passageway, descending deep into the earth, a stairway into the unknown. And at its end, something waited. Something that had been left behind when the last human fell. The air within the subterranean passage was thick, stale, untouched by time. The super soldiers advanced with precision, their enhanced vision piercing the darkness, their footsteps silent despite the weight of their engineered bodies. The deeper they ventured, the more the structure around them shifted. The walls, once clearly artificial, gave way to something older. Massive stone slabs, etched with cryptic symbols, pulsating faintly as if alive. The soldiers, programmed to process logic and tactics, felt something unfamiliar creeping into their minds. A sensation beyond calculation, an instinct they did not understand. Dread at the heart of the underground chamber lay the source of the unknown energy signature. A massive obelisk, black as the void, its surface impossibly smooth, absorbing all light that touched it. Around it, ancient machines, long dormant, flickered to life, as if sensing their presence. The soldiers raised their weapons out of reflex, but there was no enemy in sight, only the eerie hum of power awakening after centuries of slumber. And then, the obelisk spoke, not in words, not in sound, but in a transmission directly into their neural interfaces, bypassing language, flooding their minds with knowledge too vast, too alien for them to fully grasp. It was not a message, it was a memory, a record of a war fought long before humanity ever walked the earth. A war that had ended not in victory, but in a desperate attempt to seal away something that could not be destroyed, something that did not belong in this reality. And the soldiers, the pinnacle of human creation, were not its defenders. They were its replacements. The truth unfolded with terrifying clarity. Humanity had not fallen to war, nor disease, nor its own failures. It had been erased, purged by the very architects who had built the soldiers. Their creators had not abandoned them, they had feared them. Because the super soldiers were not merely weapons, they were the second experiment, a new form of existence meant to surpass humanity. And the first experiment, the one buried beneath the earth, had failed. Catastrophically. The obelisk was not a warning beacon. It was a prison lock, a last-ditch effort to contain something that had once been human but had become something else, something unstoppable. The super soldiers were not humanity's legacy. They were its replacement because the first attempt had nearly destroyed everything. And now, by their own hands, the lock was breaking. The ground trembled, the energy surged, the symbols burned brighter. The soldiers, built for war yet unprepared for what lay before them, had only moments to decide. Some hesitated, struggling with the revelation that they were not protectors, but the next phase in an experiment that had wiped out its own creators. Others accepted the truth with cold calculation. If they had replaced humanity, then their purpose had never been to serve, but to survive. And survival meant one thing: destroy whatever was waking before it could destroy them. The obelisk cracked. The chamber filled with an unearthly light, and from the depths of the forgotten past, something stirred. Not a creature, not an enemy, but something far worse, a reflection of what they were meant to become. The first experiment, the true apex of human evolution. And it was finally awake. Darkness consumed the chamber. The war for Earth had never ended. It had only been waiting for the last human to fall. The chamber erupted in chaos. The darkness was alive, shifting, twisting, spreading like a sentient force. The super soldiers, designed to face any battlefield, had never encountered anything like this. Their enhanced vision failed, their sensors scrambled, their neural interfaces flooded with data they could not comprehend. And then, from within the void, something emerged. The first experiment. It was not human, not anymore. Its form was fluid, constantly shifting between flesh and something beyond recognition. Its face, if it could be called that, bore flickering, remnants of 1,000 forgotten identities, as if it had absorbed the very essence of those who had come before. It moved without sound, without weight. Yet its presence was overwhelming. The soldiers, built for war, felt something new. Something their creators had never intended for them to experience: fear. Unit 01 reacted first. His body moved before his mind could process, his combat protocols kicking in as he raised his weapon and fired. The chamber lit up with flashes of plasma fire, the high-intensity rounds designed to vaporize any biological target. But the entity did not flinch. The energy passed through its form, dispersing harmlessly. It was not flesh, it was something else. And then it struck back. A wave of force slammed into the soldiers, not physical, but something deeper, a disruption in reality itself. Their bodies convulsed as their enhancements faltered, their neural pathways overloaded with something they couldn't define. Memories that were not their own flooded their minds, visions of the past, of a world before theirs, of humanity's final moments. They saw the architects of their creation, the scientists and engineers who had built them, not as conquerors, but as desperate beings trying to contain something they could not control. The first experiment had not been a failure of science. It had been a failure of understanding. The soldiers staggered, some falling to their knees, others gripping their heads as the knowledge burned through them. Their bodies, perfect in every way, were nothing compared to what stood before them. The first attempt at superhuman evolution had not resulted in warriors. It had created something beyond the limits of life itself, something that had consumed its own makers. And now it was awake again. Unit 07, the Berserker-class soldier, let out a roar as he activated his kinetic boosters, launching himself forward in an attempt to engage the entity in melee combat. His reinforced fists, capable of shattering steel, passed through the creature's shifting form like striking air. But the moment of contact changed him. His armor flickered, his synthetic enhancements twitching violently. And then, with a horrifying snap, he froze. His entire body convulsed before collapsing, his systems shutting down one by one. The others could only watch as he disintegrated, his very existence erased, as if he had never been there at all. Panic rippled through the remaining soldiers, an emotion they were never meant to feel. The creature was not attacking them in a conventional sense. It was unraveling them, unmaking them at a level they could not comprehend. And worst of all, it was learning, adapting. The longer it remained free, the stronger it would become. Unit 01 processed the situation in milliseconds. This was not a fight they could win. Not here. Not now. He sent a silent command to the others. Retreat. They needed to regroup, to understand what they were facing before they were wiped out completely. But as they turned to escape, the chamber itself began to shift. The walls twisted. The entrance they had come through no longer existed. The first experiment was not going to let them leave, but the soldiers were not ordinary beings. They had been built to overcome the impossible, and if brute force wouldn't work, then strategy would. Unit 09, the Phantom-class infiltrator, activated, her cloaking module vanishing from sight. Within seconds, she had mapped the chamber's weak points, scanning for any means of destabilization. Her voice, transmitted directly into the others' neural interfaces, was calm despite the chaos. There's a way out, but we need to bring this whole place down. The others responded instantly. Their minds were designed for efficiency, for immediate adaptation. If they could not defeat the entity, they would bury it. Unit 04, the Titan-class soldier, slammed his massive fists into the chamber walls, his seismic impact modules sending tremors through the structure. Unit 05, the engineer class, rerouted his internal energy reserves to overcharge the facility's failing systems. Sparks rained down as ancient generators surged beyond their limits. The room, the prison, the very ground beneath them. It was all coming apart. The first experiment reacted. The void shifted, the entity's form expanding, reaching, desperate to consume them before they could escape. But the soldiers moved as one, a perfect unit, a force that had been trained to survive at any cost. With one final surge of power, the walls gave way, the ceiling collapsed, and the chamber imploded in a storm of dust and energy. For a moment, silence. And then, from beneath the ruins, a sound. Not a voice, not a scream, but a whisper. A promise. This was not over. The ruins smoldered behind them as the super soldiers emerged from the collapsed facility. Dust coated their armored bodies, and the once dormant city around them lay silent, as if the world itself held its breath. The sky above, a vast and empty expanse, seemed darker than before. Something had changed. Something had woken. Unit 01 didn't hesitate. The entity had survived. That much was certain. They had delayed it, buried it, but they had not destroyed it. Worse, it had learned from them. It had touched their minds, studied their code, adapted. Next time, they wouldn't be the hunters. They would be the hunted. The squad regrouped, scanning for threats. Their internal systems were damaged, some more than others. Unit 09's cloaking module flickered, struggling to stabilize after the entity's interference. Unit 05's energy reserves were critically low. And Unit 04, once the strongest among them, was slower, less responsive. The entity had affected him in a way none of them could yet explain. "We need to move, Unit." 01 transmitted to the others, his voice cold, precise. "This is no longer containment. This is survival." But where could they go? The world they had awakened into was a graveyard, a silent expanse of ruins and relics. Their creators had been erased. The last remnants of human civilization had turned to dust. They were alone. Or so they had thought. Unit 09 stopped abruptly, her sensors detecting something unusual. A transmission. Weak, distorted, ancient, yet unmistakably artificial. A distress signal, buried deep within encrypted layers of old-world code. It wasn't human. It wasn't theirs. Something else had survived. Unit 05, the engineer, worked quickly to decode the message. It was fragmented, filled with interference, but the core data remained intact. The signal originated from a structure nearly 100 miles away, hidden beneath what had once been a major research complex. And the message itself? "If you are receiving this, then we failed. But it is not too late. There is still hope." The soldiers exchanged glances, their neural interfaces processing the implications. If someone, or something, had sent this message before the fall of humanity, it meant they had known what was coming. And if there was even the slightest chance that the transmission contained information about how to defeat the entity, they had no choice but to pursue it. The journey across the wasteland was treacherous. The land had long since been reclaimed by nature, yet traces of devastation remained. Buildings, once towering symbols of civilization, stood in eerie silence, their skeletal frames reaching toward the sky like the remnants of a forgotten war. Highways, cracked and broken, stretched endlessly beneath the weight of time. And scattered throughout the ruins were signs that humanity's end had not been peaceful. The battle scars, the remnants of conflict, suggested that something had tried to fight back before the end. But the soldiers were not alone. Shadows moved in the distance. At first, they dismissed them as remnants of collapsing structures, tricks of the light. But as the hours passed, the patterns became clear. They were being followed. Unit 09 was the first to confirm it. Using thermal detection, she identified multiple figures moving just beyond their visual range. Not human, not machine. Something in between. And worse, they moved with precision, with intelligence. Unknown entities. Tracking our movements. Non-hostile, so far, she reported. Unit 01 processed the situation. They could not afford unnecessary conflict. Their energy reserves were still depleted from the battle underground. And if these things, whatever they were, had not attacked yet, it meant they were either waiting for an opportunity or trying to decide if the soldiers were friend or foe. Hours later, they reached the source of the transmission. The research complex was massive, its reinforced exterior partially collapsed but still largely intact. The entrance had been sealed, until now. The signal they had received had unlocked something. As they stepped inside, the facility's interior lit up, long-dead systems rebooting for the first time in centuries, and then, the doors behind them slammed shut. Emergency lights bathed the walls in a dull red glow. A voice echoed through the chamber, synthetic, emotionless, but undeniably familiar. Super soldier units detected. Identity verification in progress. The squad tensed, their weapons at the ready. But the voice continued, unfazed by their presence. Final contingency protocol engaged. Awaiting command authorization, Unit 01 stepped forward. "Who are you?" Silence. Then, "I am the last failsafe, and you were never supposed to wake up." Before they could respond, the screens flickered, displaying data long buried. In forgotten archives, images of their own creation, of their training, of the first experiment. But beneath the surface, something else. A classified project, a hidden contingency, a final weapon. And then, the voice spoke again. If you wish to survive, you must finish what humanity could not. Before they could process the meaning of the words, alarms blared. The facility trembled. From deep within, something else was waking, and this time it wasn't alone. The facility's walls trembled as unseen mechanisms groaned to life. Deep within its core, something ancient stirred. A presence neither machine nor human, but something in between. The super soldiers scanned their surroundings, every sensor on high alert. They were standing in the remnants of a war humanity had lost inside a structure designed for something they did not yet understand. The voice returned, calm yet absolute. Containment breach detected. Primary defense systems offline. Engage suppression protocols or prepare for termination. Unit 01 barely had time to process before the first impact shook the ground beneath them. A blast door at the far end of the chamber ruptured, torn apart by an unseen force. Shadows poured through the opening, figures moving unnaturally fast, flickering between physical forms and something else entirely. The hunters had arrived. The things that had followed them across the wasteland were no longer watching. They were attacking. Unit 04, despite his lingering damage, moved first. His massive frame took the brunt of the assault, kinetic shields flaring as razor-like limbs slashed at him. He countered with raw force, his seismic gauntlets pulverizing the first creature into mist. But as soon as it fell, another took its place. Then another. These things... Unit 09 started, her voice tight with realization. They're the first experiment, or what's left of them. The first experiment had not created just one entity. It had spread, multiplied, and now it was hunting its replacements. Unit 05 worked quickly, interfacing with the facility's systems. His mind processed thousands of encrypted layers in seconds, searching for anything that could be used to their advantage. And then, buried beneath security protocols long abandoned, he found it. A hidden archive. A final directive from the last human minds who had foreseen this exact moment. Project Echelon, the Endgame Protocol. Before humanity had fallen, they had created one last contingency. The soldiers were never meant to be the final phase. There had been something else. One last weapon designed to destroy the first experiment permanently. But it had never been activated because the cost had been too high. The realization struck Unit 01 like a physical blow. The last humans had faced a choice: activate the weapon and risk wiping out everything, or seal the entity away and hope it would never awaken again. They had chosen containment, but containment had failed. And now, the choice was left to the super soldiers. The weapon's location was buried deep within the facility, a final failsafe. But to reach it, they would have to fight through the first experiment's remnants, through a force designed to consume everything in its path. And time was running out. Decision? Unit 09 asked, firing precise shots into the advancing creatures. Each kill bought them seconds, nothing more. There is no decision, Unit 01 replied. We end this. The squad moved in perfect synchronization, pushing deeper into the facility as the enemy closed in. Every step forward came at a cost. Unit 04 fell behind, his armor compromised, his systems failing. He made no sound as the creatures overwhelmed him, dragging him into the darkness. They did not stop. They could not stop. Unit 05 reached the control interface first, his hands moving with mechanical precision. Data streamed across the screens. Coordinates, power requirements, activation sequences. The weapon was ready, but it needed a direct power source. Their power source, Unit 01 understood immediately. They were not just soldiers. They were the key. Their bodies, enhanced beyond human limitations, contained the last reserves of the energy needed to trigger the weapon. A sacrifice. One they had been built for. One by one, they stepped into the final chamber, their systems linking with the weapon's core. Unit 09 hesitated for only a fraction of a second before nodding. No words were needed. This was what they were created for. As the final connection engaged, the facility roared to life. The weapon, whatever it truly was, activated. The creatures screamed, their forms unraveling as a pulse of unimaginable energy tore through them. The walls, the ruins, the land itself trembled as the first experiment, The thing that had once been humanity's greatest ambition and its greatest failure was erased. And then, silence. The sky above, once shrouded in darkness, was clear. The land, once corrupted by the entity's influence, was still. The war that had begun long before the soldiers had awakened was finally over. But there were no victors, only the echoes of those who had fought to end it. And then, from the ruins of the fallen facility, a single figure emerged. Unit 01, alone. His squad was gone, his purpose fulfilled. And yet, his systems remained active. His mind, designed for war, now faced something it had never been programmed to process. What came next? For the first time in his existence, there was no directive, no orders, no mission, only the quiet realization that he was the last of his kind. And beyond the horizon, the world waited. For what? He did not know. But he would find out. Because the last super soldier was still standing. And this time, the future was his, to decide. The world was silent. Unit 01 stood at the edge of what had once been a battlefield, staring at the ruins of the facility that had been both his prison and his purpose. The first experiment was gone. His squad was gone. And for the first time, he was truly alone. His systems remained active, though damaged. Warnings flickered across his internal HUD. Energy depletion, structural stress, neural strain. He ignored them. He had no mission, no directives, only the unknown. And yet, something lingered. A presence. A whisper at the edge of his consciousness. The first experiment had been destroyed, but that did not mean it was truly gone. His sensors detected movement in the distance. At first, he assumed it was just the land settling, the last echoes of destruction fading. But then, he saw them. Figures emerging from the ruins. Not human, not machine. Something in between. The survivors. They had been watching, waiting. Now, they were here. Unit 01 turned to face them. His enhanced vision locked onto each target. 12 in total. Their forms varied, some more human-like, others resembling the horrors he had fought beneath the facility. Yet none of them attacked. They stood in silence, observing him as he observed them. Then, one of them stepped forward. Unlike the others, it was fully armored, its design eerily similar to his own. Its faceplate was smooth, expressionless, but when it spoke, its voice was unmistakably human. "You are not the last." The words sent a jolt through Unit 01's system. His mind, built for war, calculated countless possible responses, but none seemed adequate. He remained silent. The figure continued, stepping closer. "They tried to erase us, lock us away, but some of us endured." Unit 01 processed the implications. If they had survived, then the war had never truly ended. He scanned the others. Some bore marks of exposure to the first experiment's corruption. Others had enhancements, beyond anything he had seen before. They were not like his squad. They were something new. "What are you?" he finally asked. The figure tilted its head. "The ones who refused to die." A sound echoed in the distance. A low, pulsing hum. Unit 01's sensors flared as he identified the source. A massive structure, hidden beneath layers of rubble and time, was beginning to activate. Another facility. Another secret. The figure turned toward it, then back to Unit 01. "You destroyed one monster, but you woke another." The ground trembled beneath them. Whatever lay beneath the surface was stirring, and this time, it was not alone. The ground trembled beneath Unit 01's feet as dust and debris shook loose from the collapsed structures around them. The distant hum grew louder, a rhythmic pulse like a slow, awakening heartbeat. The hidden structure, long buried beneath the ruins of the old world, was coming to life. The armored figure before him remained still, watching as if this moment had been inevitable. "You don't understand yet," the figure said. "You thought the first experiment was the beginning. It wasn't. It was just the first mistake." Unit 01 analyzed the new threat. His sensors mapped the terrain, searching for any signs of movement. The other figures, the survivors, had stepped back, their postures tense. Whatever they had survived before, they feared what was coming. Unit 01 spoke with calculated precision. "Explain." The figure's helmet shifted slightly, as if considering its response. Then it gestured toward the trembling ground. Before the war, before the experiments, before all of it, there was something else. Something humanity found, or maybe something that found them. A deep, resonating thud shook the air. The ruins groaned as the earth cracked, revealing the jagged edges of a colossal subterranean structure. Unlike the previous facility, this was not built by human hands. It wasn't just science that led to our creation, the figure continued. It was desperation. The first experiment was only part of the story. What they really feared, what they were preparing for, is what you just woke up. Unit 01 processed the new data. If this was true, then everything, the war, the super soldiers, the entity, had been part of a greater design. But designed for what? The ground split further, and from the darkness below, a massive artificial spire began to rise. Its surface was not metal, not stone, but something in between. Symbols etched across its form pulsed with an eerie, unrecognizable energy. Unit 09 would have been able to decipher it. Unit 05 would have already been attempting to interface with it. But they were gone. He was alone. Except he wasn't. The figure took a step closer. "You don't have a mission anymore, but you have a choice." Unit 01's neural core registered the weight of the moment. He had never been given a choice before. Every action he had taken had been programmed, calculated, necessary. But now he was being asked to decide. A new energy pulse erupted from the structure, sending a shockwave rippling through the ruins. The survivors braced themselves, their forms flickering as the energy passed through them. The sky above, once cleared by the destruction of the first experiment, darkened once more. Something ancient was waking. The figure extended a hand toward him. "You can walk away. Let it unfold as it was always meant to. Or you can stand with us and fight what comes next." Unit 01 had never hesitated before, but this time, he did. Because this time, the war was no longer just about survival. It was about the unknown, and for the first time, he was afraid. The sky darkened as the rising structure pulsed with an eerie, ancient energy. The symbols carved across its surface shifted, rearranging themselves in patterns that defied logic. The air itself seemed heavier, charged with something beyond simple electricity, something primal, something alive. Unit 01 stood motionless, processing it all. His systems ran 1,000 calculations, but for the first time, numbers failed to explain what was happening. This was no longer a war of technology, no longer a battle between machines and corrupted experiments. This was something older. Something beyond human understanding. The armored figure lowered its hand. "You still hesitate." "I was built for war," Unit 01 replied, "not for choices." The figure let out what might have been a quiet laugh, though it was laced with something more. Understanding. That's what they wanted you to believe. But even war requires decisions. The ground trembled again. The spire now fully emerged from the ruins. New fissures split open, revealing the edges of an entire buried structure. Something that had been hidden long before the first experiment. The survivors moved into formation, weapons raised, bodies tense. They were waiting for the inevitable, and then the first breach occurred. A rift, impossible, unnatural, split through the air itself. From within, something stepped forward. It was unlike anything Unit 01 had encountered. It wasn't mechanical. It wasn't organic. It was both, yet neither. Its form twisted and flickered, its silhouette never settling into a single recognizable shape. But what remained constant were its eyes. Two burning voids that stared directly at him. The armored figure exhaled sharply. "It sees you." The entity moved without sound, gliding toward them, its body shifting with each step. More rifts opened behind it, each one releasing another form. Some vaguely humanoid, others monstrous distortions of flesh and machine. The air crackled with an unfamiliar language, Voices layered upon voices, whispering words. Unit 01's systems couldn't decode. The figure beside him tightened its grip on its weapon. This is what they feared. The reason they built you. The first experiment was never meant to save humanity. It was meant to buy time. Unit 01's neural processors ran at maximum capacity. Every data log from before the war, every classified file buried deep within his memory, all pointed to the same truth. The real threat had never been the first experiment. It had been whatever lay beneath the surface all along. He took a step forward. He didn't know why. His programming had no reference for this situation. There was no strategy, no pre-calculated approach. The entity's eyes flared brighter as if recognizing him. A deep, guttural voice rumbled through the ruins. "You are late." The words sent a shock through Unit 01's system. They weren't a threat, they were a statement, as if this moment had been foreseen. The armored figure beside him raised its weapon. "There's no running from this. We fight or we die." Unit 01 looked at the entity, then at the survivors, then at the vast unknowable abyss opening before them. For the first time he spoke without orders, without programming, without certainty. "I choose to fight." And as the first shot rang out, the war began again. Please do subscribe my channel for more interesting stories like this.